what the district will be faced with is in this 2017 and 18 school year, it's now 4 million, 6 million, 8 million. They continue to compound themselves each year thereafter. And so to the response to your question is yes. Each time, and again, I have also, Mr. Robertson, is that other than the 2012 levy, I've assumed maximizing the levies in subsequent years. So this is just the impact in subsequent years of what happens if you do not levy at the maximum this year.
Thank you.
Going forward, we continue to prioritize our overall commitment, as been stated, to maintaining adequate fund balances. We are moving forward with both a short-term and a long-term capital improvement plan, and we've talked at length in the previous meetings about how we've laid out for you over the next 5 years the significant capital improvements that we're going to be using reserves in the operations and maintenance fund, as well as potentially in working cash to actually fund those projects, as we've laid out over the course of several. This is partly what we had shared with you at the same time that we had proposed the funding of the life safety bonds. These life safety bonds, those proceeds would be earmarked and restricted for use only for those mandated projects, which we do have $26 million of approved amendments that we anticipate that will probably take about 7 years to actually complete. And so therefore, with the sale of those bonds, those dollars will be earmarked and cannot at any time in the future be used for any other purpose. Again, another consideration as to the value of issuing the bonds for those restricted purposes, depending on the uncertainty of the future that it may come with respect to legislation or future costs, as well as that we have been using reserves. Not only have we spoken to this point about the use of debt service, the reductions, and we've used working cash for that, those dollars. That option is still afforded for the Board of Education going into the future. I've simply just shown within our plan that it takes us through the 2013 year. That certainly is a future consideration. When we began talking about the life safety bonds, if you recall, in the first year, we talked about using existing reserves to pay for those initial projects. In fact, in the first year of the 2011 summer, we actually funded the first $1.5 million with existing operations and maintenance reserves. And so that is not factored in overall. So we feel as though as we kind of look at the future and the uncertainty of certainly whether it's state funding, legislation, other mandates that may be coming, we remain committed. We remain committed to sustaining the overall quality of both the instructional as well as the operational program in District 211, not only for our students, but also for our overall community. Thank you.
Any additional questions for Mr. Torres?
I do have, I guess, kind of a comment, because I appreciate the presentation. I think this is really good detail that you have for us here. So it kind of really puts us in an awkward situation of, you know, we've heard the audience speak to us, and I hear what you're saying, but yet the compound effect of not levying at our maximum causes us a problem, and we want to do the best we can for the school district and the students in that. But I'm wondering, how can we help the community in regards to the taxes? Because as you pointed out, if somebody gets their assessment reduced, somebody else ends up, you know, having to pay more in the businesses. Is there any talk anywhere in the legislation of maybe addressing that issue so taxpayers are not being hit as hard, and the businesses coming back and asking for appealing their taxes? Are we hearing anything maybe from the legislature or through EdRed or anything?
I think I'll just respond. The difficulty we have is especially in Cook County, is that you have such a wide difference in the actual assessment levels, where you have a 10% level, and the goal across the entire state is that properties would be assessed approximately at 33 to 30% of market value. Cook County is unique in that they have this classification. They have tried to simplify it. That was one of their attempts to make it better. There used to be multiple classifications, if you recall, and it was so challenging. And so as these assessments are actually determined, and then we do have the volume of businesses. We certainly have always encouraged everyone to certainly seek a proper assessment for their property and to get assessment reductions. But when an individual homeowner gets an assessment reduction, even as a percentage, the percentage of the actual assessed value of property is what causes some of the shifting itself. It's, again, referred to as sort of an unintended consequence. And unfortunately, it's the school district still gets the same amount of money. In other words, we're asking, in this example that I have, if the school district is asking for a levy of 3.5%, the school district will get 3.5%, depending on ultimately where the EAB ends up and if there's any reductions in that. But that estimate, how that's actually then redistributed is what changes from year to year to year. And so, to a point that we've made, and this is an important factor, is that even though a school district even clearly owning the fact that we represent a large portion of a tax bill, that there is still no guarantee that if there is a reduction in the tax levy itself, that would benefit an individual homeowner. Because in my illustration that I gave is that a business who are certainly on an annual basis are aggressively seeking assessment reductions. If they get any significant reduction greater than the homeowner, even if the levy is less, and that was the example when we reduced the levy. When we reduced our tax levy the first time of nearly $5 million, there were still disproportionate increases because it's a function of the actual assessment process. And so what is challenging is, though, that every property owner is going to see, obviously, a different amount. Yet, it's important that they understand that as a school district, we're not receiving, they may be paying more to us individually, but we're not getting more money on the aggregate than what we're entitled to legally.
And I think that's where we have the most questions when people call. Dave, you talk to them, and I talk to them. It's because I believe people think that we are getting more money as a district, and basically what's happening is the homeowner is paying more, and there are businesses that have had reductions in the taxes. And so that tax burden shift has made a huge difference in the past few years.
Isn't there some way we can participate in that process to slow that down?
As a school district, you have aggressively intervened, for example, in the interventions. In fact, it's one item on your agenda, in your consent agenda, was that there was a property tax appeal notice that we received for a business. We as a school district have never intervened in an appeal for a residential property. We have intervened on every property tax appeal board notice that we've received since 1998. I mean, we've received these notices, we've been able to intervene. We've been aggressive. And I want to say it's been close to over 600 actual interventions where we are simply challenging that assessment reduction of the business on behalf of the homeowners. In other words, you're doing what you can to have a fair level of assessment. And we have been very, very successful in doing that because I'd be glad to provide additional information on that at some point in the future. But just the number of appeals that have been withdrawn by the appellants, business appellants, for no other reason, recognizing that what they're pursuing through the process is not a fair reduction. The withdrawal represented a full, we paid nothing on that. And so even though we're intervening in those, and as you also know, that only up until recently, over the past couple of years, we could only, as a school district, intervene in those property tax appeal board decisions, those notices. 2 years ago, we could, as a school district, begin intervening in the tax objection complaints. These are the circuit court challenges. Those are much more challenging for us to even be aware of those. The only way we would know is if we were actually had the court records themselves to know. There is no notices that a school district gets, or any taxing district gets, with respect to that there is a business that is seeking an assessment reduction, a large business. We have some large businesses in the greater Woodfield area that are in court seeking significant reductions, which will result in refunds potentially down the road. And I've given you some of that data to show that. And unfortunately, the volume is so large, their backlog, both at the circuit court level as well as at the PTAB level. That's why, as you saw in my illustration, is that when the money came in and money went out, and the money that went out represented refunds from 3-4 years ago. And there's no way to recover those dollars. So I made the point earlier is that we levy at 3.5%, but actually, at the end of it's all been actually collected, we really don't get our statutory level because of these refunds.
And I think it's important to note that even though we have been aggressive with the circuit court and the PTAB refunds, we still had $33 million of refund losses since 2005. And I think what we're seeing for this year already, it will be higher than what we had this past year.
We're trending that way so far.
Yeah.
We've actually lost about 1.6 million just in the first few months since August.
Intervening in that process sounds like something that effectively impacts all the taxpayers, but it's also, it involves all the taxing bodies, not just ours. So for example, how does that work? If we win in the intervention, does everybody benefit or just us?
Everybody benefits by that. And we have worked with both taxing entities in Palatine Township as well as in District 15 has worked with us cooperatively on refunds as well in interventions as well as in Schaumburg Township. I do want to make an important point about some of these that, as you know, there's a very short window to actually appeal. And so what occurs in that short window is that when you think of just the volume of parcels that make up District 211, now you expand that to Cook County overall. There is not adequate staff at the assessor's office, at the board review level, to be able to adequately and effectively be able to adjudicate these types of appeals in a very timely way. What would be ideal is if they were done all in a timely way, like it is for you as an individual homeowner in that window. So therefore, it truly adjusts the EAV properly within the year that the taxes are actually then paid.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, that will bring us to the next item on our agenda. Proposed contract for network infrastructure equipment installation. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education award the business for network infrastructure installation and implementation project to Pipe Manning, Inc. at a cost of $16,605. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mrs. Burke? Aye. Mr. Brandt? Mr. Gerber?
Aye.
Mrs. Crumpler?
Aye.
Mr. Robertson?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye. Next, we have a proposed service contract for internet access. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education awards the business for internet bandwidth services to Comcast Enterprise Business Services at a cost of $86,280 for a 2-year period. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Brandt? Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. Gerber?
Aye.
Mrs. Burke?
Aye.
Mr. Robertson?
Aye.
Mrs. Klopowitz?
Aye.
Mr. LaFarber?
Aye. Next item of business is a request for foreign exchange trips. Suggested motions that the Board of Education approve participation in 12 foreign exchange trips as proposed for the summer of 2013. District 211 reserves the right to cancel any airline travel that the district deems unsafe or to not be in the best interest of District 211. Can someone please move it?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that will bring us to committee reports. First, we have Mrs. Lipowitz and Northwest Suburban Special Education Organization.
For the NSSEO, you've gotten copies of the NSSEO board goals. I think they were very well done and put together, and Dr. Hackett took a lot of the suggestions that were offered by 211. So she's implemented those in the goals. So if you have any questions in regards to any of those goals, let me know, and I will bring them to the board there. Also, I included the 6-day enrollment because I thought that would be interesting to see, because we'll do our 6-day enrollment also. They also gave us a presentation about the transition program update. They have a number of partnerships. We utilize them because of, they work with our students getting some job training and job skills at a lot of different locations. They also have a newsletter they call Transition Times, and the emphasis behind this particular newsletter, and I can share this if people are interested, is about having these young people become self-advocates, which was just very important of teaching the kids how to advocate for themselves, because they're not always going to have their parents or the counselor or the advisor or that support always being there for them. So that was really good. And again, doing a lot more with including the parents and information sharing about IEPs, things of that nature. So they've got a wonderful newsletter that they put out. Also, we had a presentation of the mini grants that were given by the NSSEO Foundation. They had some really outstanding ones. There was a partnership with Sunrise Outdoor Education, including the families and getting the community out there at their location, which was really good. But the ones that were really interesting was they had an after-school club at Kirk, and it was called the Center for Enriched Living. And they took the kids out and did a lot of different things with the kids that they may not have done otherwise. So the kids were able to, to go together. I think that at this one they might have included, kids from minor school also. They were, high school kids. They would have been high school, and took them out and went to some different functions and different activities, which was really outstanding for them. They also had, where was it? For the visually impaired. They did recreation and leisure activities with the kids. And again, it was an opportunity for the kids from the different areas to come together and to go someplace. And the kids have kind of kept in touch with one another. And the parents were just so excited about that, because otherwise some of these kids they're isolated. They're in school and then they get home and they're not part of anything. So these were just tremendous mini grants that they did. It was just fantastic listening to the presentations. So thanks for letting me share that with you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Mr. Gerber and Ed Red.
Ed Red's got a couple meetings that they're hosting coming up if anyone's interested. Wednesday, October 24th at noon is general state aid with regard to school finance. December 10th is a Monday, 1 p.m. Is a session on mandated categoricals, if anyone's interested.
Thank you. All right, that will bring us to closed session. We have a suggested motion that the board enter closed session to discuss appointment, employment, compensation, and discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Brandt?
Aye.
Mrs. Burke? Aye. Mr. Gerber? Mrs. Bunkowitz?
Aye.
Mr. Robertson?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.